We're talking about blockchain, enterprise, finance, and enterprise, which is probably the same thing, but not really. We'll start by introducing ourselves. My name is Ajit Tripathi. I work for Consensys as a partner in financial services. Spend all my time on financial services, business development, regulation, policy, and Twitter. And I'll pass.
My name is Pruitt, and I'm the CEO of InstaSupply, and we do supply chain finance on the blockchain. We're based here in London, England, and we actually work with small and medium-sized businesses and making sure that they are able to get paid quickly.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm Vikram Kimyani. I work for Oracle. I'm a cloud solutions architect at Oracle. We're about to launch our blockchain as a service in the next week. So I do quite a lot of talking to financial services customers. I'm ex-Credit Suisse, so I have quite a few people in investment banking that I know, and all I've talked about for the last 7 or 8 months is blockchain for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So.
They're all on the blockchain.
Hello, morning everybody. My name is Wyeth. I work at NatWest or RBS in the emerging technology department. I'm one of the developers there. So we look at everything from AR and VR to quantum, but we've always had a very strong interest in distributed ledgers and blockchain.
Hello everyone, I just met you guys half an hour ago. I'm the founder of DCC. We provide a credit data transferring protocol to micro-lending platforms. Our token just being listed last month.
Cool, and as you might notice, everybody in enterprise blockchain wears a shirt. So, okay, speaking of which, Vikram, what is Oracle's plain blockchain? Aren't you guys a database company?
So we are quite well known as a database company. We've been developing systems for about just over 40 years now. So we've developed on that strength, basically. We've joined Hyperledger last year, and we're quite an active member. And we're launching a blockchain service based on Hyperledger Fabric. But we want to make it a little bit easier for people to work on that. So we want to try and make that as automated as possible. So we're calling it an autonomous service. So you'll hear a lot about Oracle, about autonomous this year. And basically, we want people to concentrate just on their smart contracts. Don't worry about the blockchain infrastructure. We want you to be able to interconnect easily with IBM systems, same software, for instance. We want to make it easy for you to concentrate on all of those issues that the IBM, I don't know if anyone saw the IBM talk earlier, but you want to talk about doing that simple thing, which is basically working out all the collaboration and working out all of the outcomes rather than the technical stuff. So we want to focus really on that, try and get people into production. Quite a lot of customers have done lots of proof of concepts. They're actually sick of doing proof of concepts and probably talk to that.
My question there is, why is Oracle not building its own fabric? Why use IBM's fabric?
So I wouldn't call it IBM's. It's open source. So there's 170 odd members in Hyperledger, and our decision process was quite simple. Do we write our own? We thought, well, we could do that, but actually, no. So open source was the first thing we wanted to do, and then we just narrowed it down, and we thought it's got to be enterprise-based. So enterprises typically want to do permissioned blockchains. They want to know who they're doing business with. And so once you get to the permission list, then you have to look at, okay, who's a member, who's active. It actually came down to only one choice at the time, which was Fabric.
Cool. So Ben, you're with RBS and you do a lot of work with Coda.
Among other ledgers, yes.
Oh, okay. So how are you deploying the different enterprise platforms, and what are you using each one for? Which use cases do you see going live in the next year?
So I suppose we look at the different ledgers for different use cases, as you say. So global consensus blockchains, we look at if we're trying to share data and data models and code with everybody all the time. So I don't know, perhaps there's corporate actions might be a good example of that. If we're looking at something which is more about showing a data model and perhaps code, but not necessarily all of the data, then we tend to head down the sort of corridor route. And for that, we're looking at things like Project Maison, which we did last year, which is a regulatory play, basically, where we can partially share data between us and, say, the FCA. And that's quite interesting as well, because we can also use it for mortgage switching, where we then later share that information with other banks.
That's a little bit boring, right? All this cost-saving stuff. Are you guys going to make any money with blockchain ever?
I think our initial use cases, because they're business case driven, will be saving money rather than explicitly making money. But I think maybe some of that stuff will emerge later on. We'll see.
Right. So my question was, is there a real business model out there that you see yourself creating in the fintech space using one of these distributed ledgers?
So I don't think a lot of the stuff that we're doing at the moment, because almost all of our stuff is business to business, we're literally creating decentralized applications that are used by all of those businesses. We're looking at that use case itself. We have this strong opinion that there's little point in backing a decentralized application with a centralized entity. And as such, we need to spin up a decentralized entity of some sort. So one of the things we're looking at the moment is a digital mutual, and the FCA have accepted us into the sandbox to take that mutual.
Last question on that is, it's not really decentralized if it's 5 banks still dominating the value chain, right?
No, that's true, but it turns out that trying to organize disparate companies to come together to build something which replaces a centralized entity is actually quite hard, and that's why the centralized entity
It's more distributed than decentralized.
Exactly. Well, no, I think that's not totally fair. I think our point is that if we can build some infrastructure which helps us to bring people together, then there's a real chance of us actually doing some of these things. Until that happens, we're struggling even to get people in the room to talk about it. So.
Okay, so Stevie, you've been a little bit more intellectually honest there, saying you're building distributed credit chain. What is it, and what's the value proposition?
We have been seeing a lot of overcharged service fees or overcharged interest rate in terms of these different kinds of service fees. So how would an individual or like a borrower to discriminate the details of these fees? So all these problems, we cannot solve it in the traditional world. So we provide a new a mechanism that would be able to make all these service providers to pay these fees through token, like the third-party payment fees or data collectors fees. All these fees can be paid by token. So this is transparent to the retail, the individual users.
So is that token a fiat token or a cryptocurrency?
Both. Now, fiat token. So the actual money flow is the fiat money. So and the service fees are paid by tokens.
And do you see that enterprises are willing to accept payments or transfer value in a non-fiat crypto token?
I think it's the aggressive companies or the entrepreneurs, they love it. They love it because tokens can be, traded in crypto exchanges, and they would like to be incentivized by.
So when you say, sorry, I'm interrupting, they love it, who are these customers? Who are these enterprise customers that actually love it?
I think small companies, all those companies who are who have some difficulties in fiat money fundraising, like the traditional equity structure. Those small companies, they would be more willing to accept this, token structure. Yeah.
And that token then represents a money transmission token or an equity token, or what kind of token is that? In terms of its valuation, because if it has a lot of volatility, then how do I account for it on my books?
Yes, great question. So I think like in our design, we have like a stable token, like the utility token for the, as the monetary tokens to be used.
So I think that's a very interesting idea because, in my own experience, I'm seeing the crypto world and the enterprise worlds merging a little bit. 2 years ago, everybody was only talking about enterprise. Last year, the talk of the town was ICOs, and everybody was, tokens. Now, the enterprise world is starting to look at tokens very closely and saying, hey, what can we do with all this innovation that's happening in the public chains, right? And which brings us to the questions on supply chain finance. So, Lee, what are you building, and who is it for?
Yeah, so I think, echoing concepts that Stu was talking about for small and medium-sized businesses, they've faced a big problem for a number of years in being able to access, the credit markets and proper financing as it relates to, their sale of goods to their customers, and it normally takes them 60 days, sort of get paid.
Right.
And governments have tried to address this challenge just recently. The UK just rolled out last year where all businesses over a certain turnover have to now publicly report on UK Gov how they're paying their businesses, and are they paying them on time, and do they offer a supply chain finance solution? And we see ourselves fitting right into that equation. I mean, it's a global movement now to help alleviate some of these challenges that medium-sized businesses face, and that banks haven't actually, most of their solutions have catered to larger companies. They haven't done a very good job of actually working directly with medium-sized businesses, and we see this as being able to facilitate that.
Well, why do you need a blockchain for that? Why can't you build a nice Hadoop cluster with an API on top, and then deploy it on the cloud, and then let all the small and medium businesses sign up and do what Facebook does, except you're doing it with receivables and payables?
Yeah, exactly, and you're exactly right.
And it will scale better.
Yeah, well, you don't need a blockchain to record all information. And we're not using a blockchain to record all the transactions. What we are actually focusing on is just the actual end piece, which is the finance. And that's really where you do, where a native token actually enables you to do some really interesting things with incentivizing certain types of behavior on.
Can you give an example?
Let's talk about, again, going back to incentivizing certain behaviors. What are the behaviors that you really need to incentivize within this payables process? A business wants to have their invoice approved by a specific date, and to enable that, you can actually use tokens to incentivize certain behaviors. You can use tokens as reward mechanisms.
Very cool.
For the business running payables if they pay on time. And there's some clever things that you can actually do that you couldn't normally do in the traditional sense that you just.
That's very interesting. So the whole crypto economics idea that started with Bitcoin is sort of coming back, and it's now coming out to the enterprise, right? Because now in the enterprise space, we are starting to explore some of these token models, and it's no longer the domain of ICOs. We are saying, look, there is a lot of innovation in public chains, and in terms of these crypto economic models, how do we apply that to enterprise scenarios? Now, Ben, that brings us to a very interesting topic. So R3 started out saying we just want to be an enterprise chain, and we have nothing to do with public blockchains. We are an enterprise company. Now, you guys have done some work with Cordite, and that sort of starts to open up some of that network to the external world. Can you explain what that concept is and what the idea there is?
So I suppose Cordite's a number of things. It's a contribution to the Corda community. It's simply, effectively, it's a call to arms to get people to write some stuff that we feel we need when we're creating distributed applications, just the ones. So there's three things in there. There's a concept called the decentralized general ledger, which is where the people aspect comes into it. Something called metering, which is more about the economics models, I suppose. And then there's the digital mutuals that we've already spoken about. So in this sense, the distributed general ledger is about figuring out that there are people floating about. So much like you have email servers with people who have addresses on those email servers, wouldn't it be nice if we could do the same thing with people and accounts and tokens?
Yep.
So we've just built a nice simple model that allows us to represent people having accounts and tokens actually just on the Corda.
But how does that actually work in a scenario where the data is not guaranteed to be shared across all nodes? As in, how do I create trust that in that sort of a network that the accounting for tokens is actually accurate across all nodes?
People can fundamentally share code. So effectively, we're sharing the shape of the data, if you like, the model.
But also, tokens are balances, right? At the end of the day, a token is a smart contract that keeps track of some balance.
No, it's not like Ethereum where you have effectively it's a distributed spreadsheet for tokens. This is much more like we're literally distributing states.
So it's not a real token.
So they are genuine pieces of data in the same way.
But it's not money or money equivalent. You cannot use it as a money or a unit of account.
I think that depends on how you choose to imbue value on these things. I mean, fundamentally, that was true with Bitcoin for a little while, and then Bitcoin developed some value in our eyes. And
yeah, but it has value because there is trust in the network that the token, everybody has a valid copy of who owns what.
Yeah, it has value because we chose to imbue it with value. That might be for that reason. There may be many other reasons.
So we need to understand that token idea better, but we are short on time.
Yes.
So we're going to move on. That's a very interesting idea, right? And I think the noise in the space is because people. I mean, there are many definitions of a token, It's like data packets back in when I was growing up. I'm still growing up. But, and the internet, we were moving from telephony to packet switch networks, and then everything was a packet and nobody knew what was in the packet. So now tokens are the packets. Tokens are sort of the killer apps of this Internet of Value. And shockingly enough, people don't want to believe that tokens are the killer app, but my opinion is that in the last 4 years that's been going around, the crypto economics and the token models are really the most interesting thing to come out of blockchain, but that's just my personal view. Which brings us to another question, right? So people have built lots of supply chain financing platforms that don't involve a blockchain. So your value proposition there is that you're creating incentive models using crypto economics, right? Now, how do you take care of data privacy and security, which is, let's say, a killer app for some of the enterprise chains?
Yeah, first off, I just echo your comments about, I actually believe the same thing.
Yeah.
The tokens really are the killer app in this whole thing. And, there are a lot of people out there doing supply chain finance and, supply chain. And they're looking at this as sort of a database upgrade, and there's no token as a key part of that whatsoever. And they're looking at this track and trace. And really the real innovation right there is, again, how do you incentivize certain behavioral outcomes? And I think your question is about data privacy. And
right. If you're going to share data across an enterprise network, then, whether I'm a small business or a big business, I don't want everyone to see my trades. How do you do that?
Well, what's interesting is in the supply chain finance space, there's certain transactions that you do want visible, and those are the transactions that we're really focused on.
And the ones that I don't want to be seen, how do you control that?
So again, like I was saying earlier, we don't put everything into the blockchain, and we don't think it's necessary to do that. And those can be...
So the blockchain is a ledger. It's sort of an accounting mechanism for who owns what?
Exactly.
Okay. That's pretty cool. Right. So going back to, a lot of great ideas are simple. We are sort of back to Bitcoin. There is still a lot of, but there are other philosophies, right? So Ben, coming back to a key value proposition is to reduce reconciliation. Reconciliation is a major problem in enterprise.
Yeah.
So are you working on something that you think is going to generate a lot of value?
Yes, Project Maison, which was the thing I mentioned earlier, was literally about partially sharing information with the FCA in near real time. And then again, that's about all of the banks sharing the same data model, but not necessarily sharing all of the data. So you choose with whom you share data, but it's all the same format. And that's quite interesting because it can reduce some of the systemic risk that's floating about in regulatory reporting at least. So I think that's an example where reconciliation goes out the window a little bit because we know that what we're looking at is what they're looking at, and the whole class of data issues just goes out the window.
Yeah, that's quite another quite simple idea, right? Some of the greatest sources of value in this space are based in very simple ideas, which brings us back to the question for Vikram. So strategically, Vikram, for Oracle, is the play to sell cloud underneath the blockchain, or are you going to make any money off of blockchains?
So strategically, we're selling the cloud service. The cloud, what's underneath, basically, you won't need to worry about it. It will be cloud-based. But the way our model works is that we have machines we call Cloud at Customer. You can run on-premise. Because I talk to a lot of banks, and we're talking about finance, and a lot of banks haven't actually moved most of the data that they deem valuable, most valuable, remains on-premise. And we're aiming for them to be able to participate in blockchain networks by sharing just the data they need to share publicly. So a good example of that.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt because we're short on time. So you have Oracle own a very large portfolio of vertical business apps, right?
Correct.
So you have Siebel, you have PeopleSoft, which you killed, and a bunch of other great things. Yep. So do you see a blockchain solution that could be the next Siebel or the next business utility app that you can deploy on Oracle's cloud?
What we'll do for applications, particularly the ones that we own, is every single application we're going to add blockchain adapters. So initially Hyperledger Fabric, because that's the one we're going to release.
Right, but my question is about the use cases. As in, do you see a business network being deployed by Oracle around, let's say, supply chains or something of value to a business network that will generate Oracle a lot of revenue?
So I don't see us creating the business networks, maybe participating, but rather partnering with companies like Lee's, for instance. And that's the kind of model that we tend to aim at Oracle.
Right, so our time is up. Do we have time for audience questions? Yes, so we have 5 minutes. Please If you have any questions in the audience, please ask now or forever remain silent. Right.
You can take the questions on the slide.
Okay, wonderful. Oh, yes. So my apologies, inexperience. What can be done to enhance blockchain to eliminate fraud and theft or improve recovery? It's open to all the members of the panel.
Well, I suppose if you've got literally a blockchain, you're literally sharing data, right? So fundamentally, from a recovery perspective, everybody can see all the data everywhere, and surely that means that things like backups are something of the past. You can go to another node and have a look at what they've got and download the chain. That's more of an issue in the non-global consensus blockchains, actually.
Okay. Any other answers to that question? No.
Anyone from the floor? We can bring you a mic if you've got
I think the next one's
Okay, I think the next question is quite an interesting one. How do we distinguish cases where there is a real need for a blockchain instead of conventional solutions? Now, Vitalik had an answer to that, but I'll open this up to the panel first.
Well, personally, I think if you can use a database at the moment, you should use a database. That's the fundamental thing. You need to look for genuinely decentralized applications, and it's hard to find them, but they're there.
My comment to that is there seems to be a lot of technology out there right now that's searching for a problem. And what we're focused on as a business at InstaSupply is that we're actually really solving real-world problems today, and that's what we're focused on.
Yeah, no, I think I put it slightly differently. We are in a massively parallel search for a killer app, right? Think about this as a community Google. I mean, we are all trying to find out what new value we can create, where we can extract value from the existing value chains, where we can make things more efficient. And we are applying this blockchain lens to hundreds of things, 90% of which it may not apply to, but when it comes to the remaining 10%, we're going to generate a huge amount of value. So most of these ideas are going to fail, but that's just what startup land looks like, and it's a lot of fun in the meantime. So next question, what determines the quality value of a token? What does that mean? Many appear to have no intrinsic value. That's fair. So most ICO tokens, for example, don't seem to have any intrinsic value. So do you know any tokens that actually have intrinsic value?
Security tokens do have intrinsic value.
Right.
But I think that's a really big question right there. But ultimately, it's the value of the token within the network, and the adoption of the token is what gives its value, right? Or if there's an underlying asset like we see in security tokens.
Right, so that's an interesting one, right? So at the end of the day, the value of the token is rooted in the value of the network and the value of the applications it supports. So in starting out, even Ethereum had no value, but today Ethereum has a lot of value because it supports a lot of apps. And as apps become more valuable, the value of the token will go, or if they are not as valuable, then it will show in the value of the token, right? So that's the underlying token economics of most blockchains.
So go out and buy more CryptoKitties.
Go out and buy more CryptoKitties, or maybe build your own crypto dogs or whatever, right? But at some point, a lot of these my personal belief is that a lot of these apps that are starting out in the public chain will become internet apps in the same way that private clouds, data centers became public clouds. People become more comfortable with this new tech, security becomes better. And then we don't know if it will be Ethereum or EOS or whatever else, we'll find out. But there will be this internet of value where tokens have a lot of value, right? At least that's my belief. Now, last question, we are nearly out of time. And this is for Ben, very close to home. Ben, what might be the first use case RBS would actually implement in production, define production, as in business production?
Not sure I can officially answer that question. There are some use cases that are, I suppose, close to some of the people on this panel, which might well make into production quite soon. The other one would be something like Project Maze, and a regulatory use case I think might be quite close to something we do very quickly.
I have a guess on that, but I'm not going to answer that. Last question. Doesn't JP Morgan's quorum solve the problem of data privacy using zero-knowledge proofs? You can verify the data without having to actually see it. Any better engineers than me on this?
I would have thought that with something like quorum, the whole point is that everybody can see the data, is it not? Fundamentally, if you don't all agree on what the data is, it's no longer a global consensus blockchain.
So the answer to that is yes. Quorum, in addition to a couple of other tools, supports very granular privacy models. But at the end of the day, zero-knowledge proofs are early-stage tech, right? So ING have done a lot of great work on range proofs recently. But this is still early stage tech unless it's been in production for some time. We need to test it out. We need to continue to attack it. And once this cryptographic technique has become established, yes, we'll have a good solution. But it's still a couple of years away from that. That's it. And thank you so much for listening. Hopefully it was more fun than the other panels.